Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Finance Committee of the State Bar. As a reminder, this committee meeting is being recorded. And if I could ask our committee coordinator, Ms. Harvey, to please call the roll.
Broughton. Delenn.
Here.
Seleg. Sol.
Present.
Tony.
Present.
Okay. I believe we have a quorum.
All right. We have a quorum and we will proceed into our agenda. The next item on the agenda is a call for public comment. Just a reminder that the State Bar staff will attempt to call members of the public in the order in which they appear in the attendee pool. For those participating by Zoom, should have a function where you can virtually raise your hand. It's the hand icon and it'll appear at the bottom of the center of your screen. And if you wish to address the committee, please click on the hand icon so the State Bar staff can recognize you. And for those of you that may be participating by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing the *9 key. That's the *9 key. And once again, State Bar staff will alert you as to when it is that you can make your public comment. Try to, as I mentioned earlier, try to do that in the order in which we see hands go up. Ms. Harvey, do we have any members of the public that wish to address the Finance Committee?
I do not see any hands of the public presently. So, no, we do not.
All right, very good. So let's move on with the agenda. I think the next item on the agenda is the chair report. And I don't really have much of a chair's report today, other than to say I think we just have a few items on the agenda, including our work plan, and I think we'll just sort of move forward. The next item on our agenda is to deal with our consent calendar, and I'd like to ask if there are any members of the committee that would like to pull any items off the consent calendar. Hearing and seeing none, Ms. Harvey, can I ask you to take the vote on the passing of the consent calendar? Or first, I need a motion, please. Can I get a motion on the consent calendar, either Ms. Dillon or Mr. Tony?
Yes, I move that we the approval of the consent agenda.
I second.
Broughton. Delenn.
Yes.
Seleg. Tony.
Aye.
All right.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I think that moves us to the first discussion item on the agenda. Just want to make sure I'm moving forward the way I need to move forward in terms of the agenda. And that item is to discuss the attorney regulation and consumer resources issues related to sort of the professional sort of fee analysis. We've done some of this previously, and these are a couple of other sort of fees that our finance office has done fee analysis of. Do I see Ms. Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Montoya Chico, and Mr. and Lawrence, are the two of you there to make this presentation?
Araceli indicates she still needs to be let into the meeting.
And I'll note for Ms. Harvey that Mr. Seleg has joined the Finance Committee meeting.
And I'm here, Arnie.
All right, very good.
I am here now.
Araceli and Lawrence, you want to take it away with item A?
Yes,
Okay, please.
yes. So I will be sharing my screen. Let me know when you see it. Okay.
I can see it.
My screen? Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to kick off the Finance Committee meeting with this first agenda item, which is the analysis for the Office of Attorney Regulation and Consumer Resources and the Office of Professional Competence. So joining me today to present is Lawrence Liao. He's one of our two finance staff that worked many hours on this fee analysis, as well as the admissions analysis with Andrew Conover. I've also asked a few of folks from these two offices to join in case some of you have more detailed questions on these programs that they may, that they should be able to answer. So really quick, this item is a discussion item only. No action has been asked of the committee. As you will recall, in May, we presented the admissions programs, and that was also a discussion item. The plan is that in the September board meeting, we are going to come back to bring a final proposal of all of the fee increases for these three offices. And at that time, we're going to ask for the board's approval for those fee increases for these three, for all of the programs from these three offices. There we go. So similar to the admissions program, these the ARCR and the OPC programs are all intended to be generally self-supporting. They're not supported by the general fund. And we have done this fee analysis according to our current policy, which is to review these fees every 5 years. This is a summary or a recap of all of the fees that we did review in 2017. You'll see that for ARCR, only these three programs were reviewed. So no, not all of the ARCR or OPC programs were reviewed in 2017. And really, out of these three that were reviewed back in 2017, only one, the MCLE Providers Program, resulted in an increase in fees. And that was a $37 fee increase for the single activity provider and a $150 increase in the multiple activity provider. Again, this is just a summary of all of the 2022 programs that we did review for all of these three offices: admissions, ARCR, and OPC. This presentation will focus on ARCR and OPC. And these were the 8 programs that we did review this time around. Out of all of these 8 programs, the upcoming slides are going to focus on those that resulted in a deficit position. So this is a summary of those ARCR and OPC programs that did result. Yeah, it is moving along. These are the 5 programs out of the 8 that did result in a deficit position. So in the upcoming slides, which I'm going to pass over to Lawrence now, he's going to go into, he's going to share the methodology. It's just a reminder of the methodology we used to come up with the revenue costs and ultimately the deficit of these programs, as well as he'll go into each of these programs in a little bit more detail. So now I'm going to pass it on to Lawrence.
Thank you, Araceli. Just a reminder, everyone, this is the methodology that we used when we were assessing and reviewing the fees. Very top of mind, revenue. We looked at a 4-year historical applicant trend, and then we validated that information with the ARCR and or OPC teams to make sure that they made sense. And then we came up with a calculation for a future revenue projection. On the expense side, again, we looked at fully loaded labor costs, and then we assigned each cost based on the amount on a program basis. And then the FTEs that were not assigned to a specific program, we allocated evenly based on a proportion of the program size based on FTE. Third point was we added the indirect cost, and that was based on the budget for 2022 for the SF and LA interfund allocation. And finally, for the external costs, these are all the other costs that included temp, contractors, services, software, et cetera. And that was based on the 2022 budget. And then we made adjustments for items that were one-time that wouldn't reoccur in the future, and as well as any future cost that we know of that is going to come up in the next 5 years. Next slide, please. Yeah. So here's just a high-level summary of the way we looked at the calculation. Our projected revenues, our expected cost, indirect, external, and that will help us determine whether or not we needed to look at fees a little bit more diligently. Next slide, please. So to begin with is the MCLE provider certification under OPC. Again, at the top, you can see the current forecast for revenue moving forward is roughly 309,000. Our projected cost is roughly a little under 1.1 million. That nets into in the red position of about 775,000. I do want to note that the costs here include 2 additional FTEs to reduce the lead times by half. So we understand that they are currently in an underwater position. However, in order to improve the service times, the lead times, we needed to add a few additional FTEs, and that is built into this projection and cost. On the lower portion, you can see the mathematical exercise of if we were to bring this program back to a break-even point, we would require fees to be increased roughly 260% evenly spread across each of the different specific fees. And then on the right-hand side, you can see OPC's initial proposal for fees, which are obviously lower than what would be required for a break-even point. So you can see their recommendation would improve the deficit roughly $280,000. Yeah, we can go to the next program, please.
This is it.
The next program. Oh, this is it. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you. It's very similar. Yeah. So this one is the minimum continuing legal education, and you can see the projection here for revenues is 210,000, and then the projected cost is roughly 736,000, leaving a deficit of about roughly $500,000. And so you can see the requirement across the board of the break even would be increasing fees 255% for all the different fees. And the initial proposal from the ARCR team is roughly, you can see, ranging from 33% to 300% and improving the deficit by roughly 87,000. So that still leaves us in a pretty sizable deficit, about 438,000. Yeah, next slide, please. So the lawyer referral service is a little bit different. The fees are designed a bit differently relative to the programs that we've seen in the past to kind of point out the certifications. As you can see, the fees range between 1,000 and 5,000, depending on whether or not it is a for-profit organization or non-profit organization. And historically speaking, the past 4 years, we haven't really seen any new or initial certification applications. So that was very, very challenging for us to project. And to be conservative, we decided to not project any revenue for that piece. But the vast majority of the revenues that come from this program are from the recertifications that happen annually. And they are based off of a 1% of the gross revenues from the LRSs. And the past couple of years, you can see we've averaged it out to be roughly in the neighborhood of 95,000 or so from a revenue perspective. And then you can see the cost projection is roughly 350,000, leading to a deficit of 257,000. You can see from the expectation to break even, we would need to increase the percentages from 1% to 4%, which is obviously a 300% increase. And OPC's initial proposal is a 2% increase, and then keeping the cap flat at 10,000 to get to improving the deficit by roughly 96,000 and leaving a net deficit of roughly 161,000. So I think one of the other things to point out is many of the LRS programs operate at break even or deficit, and they are often eligible for a fee waiver. So I think this is a little bit different kind of program that we have seen, whether in admissions and previously. Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. So the mandatory arbitration fee, again, is very different compared to the other programs that we've seen. The arbitration fee is based on a percentage. So the way the fee is calculated is, in this case right now, currently, it would be 5% off of the amount or value that is in dispute. And then that would be capped at 5,000 and a minimum filing at 50,000. So it's a little bit challenging, we feel like, to make a very, very accurate projection. And at the same time, we want to point out that this program isn't necessarily intended for the revenues to cover costs. It's more, the program is designed to assist those that have issues with the attorneys that represented them in the past for whichever cases that may be, and then they're filing grievances and that sort of thing. So I think the intent of this program is probably a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. It's something very straightforward, like an admissions or a straight fee for services. This is more toward to allow the folks in the public to have some sort of way to I guess file grievances in a sense. And you can see here the current fee is 5%, and then in order to break even, we would have to increase the percentage to 23%, and then the cap would increase from 5,000 to 24,000. Obviously, this is a significant increase, and OPC has their initial proposal of a 2% increase to 7%, and then tier the caps. Anything below $250,000 would be capped at $7,500, and anything above $250,000 would be capped at $15,000, and that would obviously improve the deficit by roughly $50,000, but still leave a net deficit of about $181,000. Next slide, please. Certificates, going back here is a bit more straightforward. This is just a fee to process certificates. The expectation is roughly 10,000 of these for a net revenue of 250,000. And the program cost is 354,000 to net a in the red position of roughly 104,000. And recommendation would be to break even would be increasing to 45%. And the initial proposal from the ARCA team is raising it just roughly 20% and improving the deficit by 50,000. So this is a very straightforward program. And just to next slide, please. And this is just, again, a fee specific detailed view, as you can see, by program, and then the deficit, and then the specific fees. And this is just a very comprehensive, consolidated view of what the current fee is, what the break-even fee would be, and then the respective percent changes. And you can see most of the recommendations aren't necessarily designed to break even at this point. Next slide, please. And again, this is going back to our summary that we showed you at the beginning. We have a roughly $1.9 million total deficit for these 5 programs that we've seen that has a deficit. Next to that on the right, you can see the revenues that will be required to break even, and the net position, as well as the team's initial proposal. And that only sums up to 1.3. So there would be an improvement of roughly $562,000 if we were to use the initial proposals from the ARCA and the OPC teams. Yeah, and then I think lastly, some potential solutions is, I think also some things to consider is which fees or how much do we raise fees? Do we go with the proposals from the ARCA and OPC teams, or something else, or do we use the get to the break-even point? Again, some programs be subsidized by others? Like I mentioned before, the MFA, this isn't necessarily designed to break even, so to speak. And then if we were to cut costs, how and where would we do that? From a high level, the vast majority of the costs are labor, and the amount of FTEs per program is minimal. There's just a handful of FTEs assigned to each program, so it doesn't seem like there is a significant amount in that respect. Yeah, and then opening up for questions if anyone has.
I do have a question.
Hey, Sonia.
Do you have a the subsidy? Do you have the plan where you can have a subsidizing the other programs? Do you have that? If
No,
there
yeah,
were,
no,
do you have that study where you can try to do the subsidy and see which one and how it will look like?
we don't have any plans specifically to determine which programs would subsidize which other programs, but I think just the understanding that, for instance, like the MFA isn't necessarily designed to be profitable or to break even. So that by design, if we agree that the benefit or the goal of that program is more of a general service, for instance, then we would understand, okay, then that program would have to be subsidized to some extent by other programs. In generally speaking, not anything specific.
And so there will be other programs that would be able to subsidize other programs, or is it
right? We did look at 8 programs, and these were the 5 that were in a deficit. So, for instance, at a very high level, we could argue, or we could bring up some of the other programs that are not in the red. Could those positions somewhat subsidize if we look at all the programs together, right? How those positions look relative to looking at each specific program.
And thank you. And in cutting costs, would automation or anything like that help in cutting any costs? And have you looked into that?
I do believe there is some investment planned for software and systems to improve efficiencies, but that would have an initial dollar investment, and you would see the benefit down the road. But there is those. I think for the MCLE, those costs are built into that cost, the program cost that we looked at. So that's definitely part of it. So this is not necessarily, I think those benefits you would see down the road, but yeah, I don't think, I'm not in a position to understand the nuances of like how to automate and to improve costs in that respect.
Thank you.
And Sonia, I will say this is one of the things that we are going to consider when we get back together, evaluate all of the programs for all of the offices. For admissions, for example, we do know that we do have the ability to have some of the programs subsidize others. And we ran that by OGC, and that is one of the factors that we are going to consider when we come back in September to bring the fee increases. If some other program's going to subsidize one that's in a deficit position.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and thank you for the reports, by the way. Yeah, and it will be good because we cannot silo this, and it has to be more on a global scale for where we can really make it more effective for everyone. I mean, for all the programs. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions from committee members?
I have a question. It's hard for me to
Sure, Mr. Tony.
raising my hand, but so here's I have a couple of basic questions. One is, what pays for the deficit right now?
That's your first part of the question. These numbers are based off of projections, right? This is based off of our 2022, our revenue projections for 2022 and cost assumptions now going forward. We do have some reserve funds where these programs are currently sitting in. So right now, yes, there's some reserve funds that should be able to cover some of the deficit, but we can't keep having deficit programs in the long run because it will eat up all of the reserve funds, and we don't want to be in that position.
Fair enough.
But
Thank you.
let me just elaborate a little bit. For these programs here today, these are budgeted in the general fund. The source of the funds is the attorney licensing fee. And any additional fee programs that are in the general fund. So it's essentially the general fund that's subsidizing the deficit in these individual programs, which stems back to the attorney licensing fee. When we looked at the deficit in admissions, there it really is the admissions fund balance in particular, because overall there's this structural deficit in that program. So we're very much chipping away at the fund balance. So just wanted to expand on Araceli's answer.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Tony, before you ask your next question, just on this subject, can I just ask a question as well, please? And that is, could you just remind the committee members, so it was after the proposed fee increases, we would still have a $1.3 million deficit or $1.4 million deficit with these set of programs. The previous fee analysis that we did, what was the deficit amount after the proposal as well?
For admissions?
Yes, do you remember what that was? I'm just trying to get a sense of what the cumulative total deficit would be.
Yeah,
think
I can,
for-
Araceli, I can pull it up and,
Okay.
and do it. I think obviously two different funds, right? Number one, but I think overall we were looking at a deficit of roughly 7.75 million for the admissions program when we looked at it in May.
Okay, thank you. Please, Mr. Tony, please go ahead.
Thank you. And so I'm trying to get a handle on how, you know, these are some pretty big numbers in terms of the deficit, okay? And I mean, we've got deficit that exceeds the revenue, pretty much what I'm looking at, okay, on this impact of fees increases to bridge a deficit. By the way, this is really well put together presentation. I appreciate it a great deal. Very easy to follow and understand. And that I just want to commend the staff for that. So it's so what I'm seeing is the red numbers, you know, at least to start out with, exceed the you know, that it's not only that the cost exceeds the revenue, but the deficit exceeds the revenue. So that's a lot. So I guess, you know, part of the question is, how do we get here in the first place? I'm wondering whether in 2017, whether there was some underestimation of costs, because it's hard for me to believe that the deficit is ballooned by 200% and 300% just by staffing costs alone, unless you added a whole bunch of staff to this. So I'm just trying to get a sense, because it also plays to the question of what is our ultimate goal here? If we are doing a stopgap measure in September and we're putting a Band-Aid on this, you know, what are we looking at down the line in terms of the outcome and the long-term goals here?
So I'll speak to the historical question. In 2017, when I did the first study, we looked at all the programs in admissions that hadn't recently been raised and all the programs under ARCR. And the lawyer referral program and mandatory fee arbitration were not under ARCR at the time, so those weren't reviewed. So this is the first time we've actually looked at them. So we can't really compare to see, did we raise the rates enough or not? The only program we looked at that did have a fee increase was MCLE provider certification. We did increase those fees. They are still in the red, so apparently they weren't increased enough.
But Andrew, there also has been a change in the methodology, correct? Because in 2017, we did not take into account the overhead allocation in determining the amount of fees needed to cover operating costs. This time around, the operating cost calculus includes cost allocation. Isn't that correct? So that's
Yeah,
a very
I can speak to that.
change in the methodology.
Yeah, just for some context and perspective, I believe in 2017, the only aspect was the overhead, direct overhead was put into the calculation. And this time around, with Leah's guidance, we looked at a total cost perspective, and that includes all the indirect costs. And as for scale, on a per person basis, it went up roughly 4x in most cases, from a $20,000 per person overhead cost to, in some instances, $90,000 to $100,000 per person cost allocated. So you can see that can definitely add a significant amount of cost to each of the programs that wasn't there in 2017.
Thank you. So look, I'm cognizant of time. So instead of asking questions, I'm going to make some recommendations that I'd like to be considered as part of the proposal in September. So one is I just would like to have a sense of what the end game is, so that it's not just we're passing a one-time stopgap measure that does not, currently the proposals I see do not close the budget, the deficit, okay? And if there's a reserve that's covering it, that we have an idea of how much that reserve is, how long it's going to last, okay? So that we can make an informed decision. So that's recommendation number one. Recommendation number two is that we, look at the whole range of solutions. Right now, the main solution is to increase the fee revenue. I would like at least to be considered, how can we look at trimming some costs? And how can we, and this was alluded to, how can we figure out a way to get external revenue into the programs? If not for the September, but a clarity on what's going to be looked at. And my third and final recommendation is, I think what I've learned from this experience is that 5 years is too long of an interval to go in between reviewing the cost of this. If we've seen the costs go so high, I would strongly recommend that as part of the proposal, that we review this every 2 years, okay? And then if we need to make corrections, they will be smaller corrections and will be less painful for everybody involved, both us as a decision maker, but also more importantly, the folks who are going to have to pay these fee increases. So those are just things that I don't need long responses to right now, but those are some of the things I would be expecting to see as part of the September proposal. And the final thing is, I really appreciate, Araceli in particular, your leadership in making sure that this issue has been fully vetted both with the Finance Committee and the board for at least 2 full meetings before we get to a decision. That is an example of good governance. We're given the time to think about it, the time to discuss it, and the time to keep working on proposals in the meantime. I very much appreciate that.
Also being mindful of time. Mr. Tony, are you good, Mr. Tony? Sonia, are you okay? Sean, anything on this item from you, Mr. Swag? I know this is just
nothing. Yeah, nothing for me. Thanks, Arnie.
All right, very good. I know this is just a discussion item, and I would ask the staff team to please take into consideration Mr. Tony's suggestions for when you come back with our final recommendations here. And I do have just 2 really quick questions. One of them is, in this set of of fees that were analyzed. I think there were 5 that were in deficit. There were 3 that were not. I just want to make sure that the 3 that we did not analyze, is there some rule of thumb that we're using to say, okay, they aren't in deficit, but they have a reserve amount or a revenue amount of X amount, so therefore they don't need to be examined. So there's some sort of projection that says that they will not be in deficit at over some period of time.
Lawrence and Andrew, do you have?
Well, we looked at all the programs under ARCR, and several of them were in the black. And so in the attachment A and B, we show all the programs that we looked at. The ones we discussed today were only the ones that we reported in the red.
Right.
So we didn't exclude any on this round.
I think what Ernie's asking is, does the methodology include a projection, perhaps over what is right now a 5-year interval, to see what the fee situation will look like in the future? Is that what you're asking, Ernie?
Yeah, just for the 3 that we didn't look at, just trying to make sure that they're going to be okay.
Yes, just to looking at the current positions based on the projections we had made and reviewed with the teams specifically, they were all well in the black. They weren't, for instance, on the cusp or on the border of potentially being in the red in the next couple of years. They look fairly healthy, so there shouldn't be any issues with those programs that we did not discuss today.
Okay, very good. And my next question is just the item that you'll bring back for action in September. That will be both the admissions fees and this set of fees as well. Is that correct?
Correct. So all of the admissions programs that we want to recommend a fee increase, and these 5 programs from ARCR and OPC. So yes, everything.
And Mr. Tony, your suggestion or your recommendation about looking at this every 2 years, that would encompass the entire sort of portfolio of fees that we've discussed. Is that correct?
That is my recommendation. I fear that if we don't do another look, that 5 years from now, and part of the challenge is that it'll probably be a different set of trustees, that we will be burdening them with even a greater deficit than we find ourselves in now. We really need to be reviewing these things every other year so that we can stay on top of it. And that those of us who make a decision also bear some of the responsibility of assessing the consequences of our decisions instead of kicking it down to people who have not been appointed yet.
Good. All right. I think we've had a very good discussion on this one. I appreciate the staff's report and the recommendations that have been given by the members of the committee. And so I think we're in a good position to move on to the next item. And so with that, the next item is a proposed 2022 budget amendment. And I think Ms. Montoya Chica, you're going to lead this item as well.
Yes, correct. It's me. So I know we're running short on time, but the next 2 items should go fairly quickly. This next item, the proposed 2022 budget amendment, I won't have a presentation for it. All of the details of the individual budget amendments are in attachment A of this agenda item. So I'll just highlight a few things about the budget amendment. So there's 2, I basically broke it out into 2 categories. The first category being those amendments we need to make due to either technical glitches we had in the system we used to put the budget, and 2 is mistakes that we made when we adopted the budget. And the second category is budget amendments as a result of new information that came to light after the budget was amended. I am asking for this amendment to be effective as of June 30th, so the end of Q2. And the reason for that is in our Q1 financial statement report, there was significant variances in a lot of our numbers. And this is all really mostly grant-related revenues and grant-related expenses. So significant variances due to those reasons that the budget was either glitches or we didn't, we made errors when we did the initial budget. I don't want to have to keep repeating the same reason why. We know what the issues are. We know what we need to do to correct it. So going forward in the future quarterly reports, if we correct these now, we won't have those significant variances show up anymore. So on the first category, again, it's all grant-related revenues relating to either HP2 or HP3. The numbers, as you can see there, I'm proposing an additional 8.7 million in grant-related revenues and about 22 million in grant-related expenses. Those are all from these inaccuracies in the budget. On the second category, I'm proposing an additional 4 million in grant-related revenues and about 9 million in grant-related expenses. And that is really mainly due to one grant, which is the Cal HFA grant. This is a new grant that was awarded in June 2022. So we want to incorporate it into the budget so that we don't have, again, those significant variances in the future quarterly reports. So if anybody has any questions on these budget amendments, otherwise maybe we can put up the resolution.
Chair Sol, may I make the motion to adopt these proposed budget amendment?
Absolutely, Mr. Tony. Can I get a second?
Sonia here. I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Ms. Harvey, will you please call the roll?
Bronson, Deland,
Aye.
Deleg,
Yes.
Tony.
Aye.
We have 3 for, none against, motion carries.
Thank you. Members, let's move on to I think this is our last item, which is approval of the Finance Committee work plan for 2022, 2023. I think I'm supposed to be a joint presenter with Ms. Montoya Chico, but I think, Araceli, I think I'm going to let you walk us through this.
Yeah, sure. So this is, again, no presentation here. This is the Finance Committee work plan. It's covering 18 months, so the rest of 2022 and all of 2023. All of the details of this work plan are in Attachment A. And Attachment B is just the prior work plan, just so you could see for your reference and comparison. I will say most of these items in the work plan are ongoing, recurring, I should say. So, review of the quarterly financials, review of the investment report, budget adoption, budget review. There's a couple items here that are one-off items. So for example, there's, evaluating the options for the new office space when we sell the San Francisco building. That'll only happen once a year. The state auditors, this is the year we're getting audited by the California state auditor. So, to basically keep an eye on the performance audit. These are the unique items that aren't going to be typically recurring every year. And this is the work plan that Arnie and I reviewed. If anybody has any comments or questions on it.
If I'd like to suggest one amendment to this work plan, which is to include in here that the Finance Committee will review the fee structure every 2 years, but to have the first review actually be in 2023, because I don't think we're going to get to where we need to get by September. And I would be okay with not getting where we need to get if we commit to returning to this in 2023 as part of the Finance Committee work plan.
What is the time frame for the work plan through December 2023, which is what it
Yes.
should be? Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm not sure that's the right place for it, Mark. I think if you do want to make a formal motion, perhaps now or in September, that every 2-year cycle be institutionalized, the right place for that to be reflected is in the board policy manual, and we could do that. That would just be my suggestion.
I think it should be in the work plan.
Okay, I'll defer to you, Arnie, on that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear, Mr. Tony. I don't think I have a problem incorporating it into the work plan. I think the the second part of the motion, I think in terms of the timing, I just wanted to make sure I was clear with what Ms. Montoya Chico and Leah were sort of trying to figure out is which the work plan is through the end of December of 2023. And Mark, you want to make sure that we do another fee analysis beginning again in 2023, sometime in 23. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're not going to get there by September of 2022. I think we can do a Band-Aid, but we're not going to get there. I don't believe we're going to get to where we want to get. And I mean, we're certainly not going to be, I mean, unless we do, I just, there's a work plan, and I think it's a good place to put, what we plan to do. And I think reviewing the fees is a good thing to do again sooner rather than later. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, I personally don't have an objection or a problem with that. It's a review. There could be action taken or not taken, but it is a review. It could be towards the latter half of next year. We can make that decision maybe sometime in September when we take further action on all the fees cumulative. Is there a problem or other members of the committee have discussion on this?
No, I don't.
I think without objection, if we could just incorporate that into the motion. And I do have just sort of one other thing that I'd just like to bring up, and that's a part of the work plan is that the first bullet in the work plan is we want to take the opportunity during the course of this next year to look at the board's investment policy and try to incorporate and diversify where it is that the board is investing its money, its revenue, et cetera, et cetera. And I think my question, Araceli, just on that one is, when do you think you'll be, I know the work plan, the span of the work plan and the time frame, but when do you think you might be in a position to be able to do that? Because it would seem like we would want to do that earlier in the year than later.
The investment policy revision, yeah. So one of the things that we do in the finance, that you guys do in the finance committee, is annually review the investment policy. We did that, I think, in the March meeting. So we will do it again in either the January or March board meeting. And by that time, we should have the policy revised and for the committee to review and approve.
Very good, very good. I probably should have asked, just from a staffing perspective, Ms. Montoya Chico and Lawrence isn't here, but with Mr. Tony's sort of recommendation, we should, another fee analysis is all doable and all possible next year, correct?
It is a lot of, very time consuming for staff. I think that's probably one of our biggest concerns is that, we will have enough staff and staff capacity to be able to perform this review. If nothing crazy happens, I think we might be able to do maybe a high level fee review. I don't know. It depends how detailed you guys suggest we should do it, but without knowing too much what's going to happen in the future, other than a recurring items. That's the only concern I have is the staff capacity to be able to do this every year.
I think I'd like to take Mr. Tony up, as I mentioned earlier, on his recommendation and suggestion. And when we come back in September, let's talk about this further. But I don't see a problem with incorporating it into the work plan.
Sure.
Yeah, we had a motion in a second or on the work plan.
We do.
With Mr. Tony's amendment to incorporate a subsequent fee analysis into the work plan for next year.
So I think maybe you can say the finance committee. Where am I?
I think maybe we can keep the first part. It looks like we actually have a duplicative update. So accepts the update to the Finance Committee 2023 work plan, comma, and then strike that second update. Included with this item as attachment A and as amended to, maybe that's where we stick Mark's language.
Get rid of that second update after work plan, Mimi.
Okay.
Okay, included with this item as attachment A,
Mhm.
and then and as amended to include a review of fees to be completed, Mark, no later than December 2023?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's perfect.
No later
Mhm.
than 20, okay.
Great.
2023.
December.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Do we want to keep the last half of this?
Yes, we have
Okay.
to.
Yep.
So change
All
that
right.
to a comma. Yeah. Okay.
I think we just need an S after fees, and so it's, and then we're good.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
With that amendment, can I have you, Ms. Harvey, call the roll?
Broughton, Delenn,
Yes.
Selig,
Yes.
Tony,
Aye.
3-4, none against, the motion carries.
All right, members, I think that is the extent of the Finance Committee agenda. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Very good. So with that, I think I will, if there's no further discussion or no further items before the committee, I think we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.